Hey guys, it's Jason here. Welcome back to my RC Cave. In this one, I've got a couple flavors of the Eachine 65 Pro to tell you about. This is the DE65 Pro with an onboard FrSky receiver. This is the US65 Pro with an external Crossfire receiver. Now, I've already got a review of this one up on my channel, so if you're looking for overview specifications, check that video out. It'll be in the cards up here somewhere. The reason why I'm coming back with another more in-depth review video is I've had a chance to fly these guys around a lot, and my perspective is a little bit different. A lot of things have occurred to me that wouldn't have occurred to me when I first started flying these things. So I wanted to share that with you guys. The second reason is that this quad right here was sent to me by Banggood. This is a review unit. This one I acquired on my own volition, so make of it what you will. You know, it is what it is. This is a review unit. This is my quad that I purchased. Eachine provides you with this small 3D printed part that you're supposed to use to sandwich the two 1S batteries together. While it does work technically, I found it to be a real pain to use, and after my first flight, I didn't use it anymore. This is what I do. I use a standard cable tie, one of these things that comes with your electronics, or maybe you can buy a bag of them on Amazon like I did. And basically, I route it. This one's undone, so you can see a little better. I route it underneath the frame. I clip off this piece of plastic so the two batteries will just sit right in there, and then I secure that cable tie together. This one's all done up. And I find that I can do it tight enough to hold the two batteries so they're not going to fall out, yet loose enough to where I can just pull them out when I need to. It's convenient, cheap, easy. It's a better solution for me. So I'm out at the park and I realize I left my Velcro cable ties at home, but I just grabbed my daughter's hair rubber band, and it works just fine. I mean, that's just an impromptu solution, just kind of to get me through the afternoon. But a couple of rubber bands tied on there a little bit more carefully than I did this one would be a pretty good solution for the battery tray. Now, the biggest difference between these two quads is, of course, the built-in receiver on this one and the external Crossfire receiver on this one. Now, you might be wondering, why would you even put a long-range receiver on a tiny whoop with a 25 milliwatt VTX? There's a couple reasons why I think that's an advantage. It's nice to know that you'll never fail safe ever, pretty much. There are times when I'll get behind a tree or I'll go over to the other side of the park, and the video will allow me to outrun the internal VTX on this one right here. When I'm flying the Crossfire version, it's pretty cool to know that the video is my limit. So if I get around a tree, if I get on the other side of the park, I just know I'll never fail safe and maybe drop the quad in an inconvenient place and lose it. Another advantage is durability. I've broken off these little receiver wires on my Tiny Hawk 2. That broke off and I had to solder it back on. It was a real pain. It's nice knowing that you have a high quality receiver on there. You know, it's like an insurance policy. Another thing I like about having external receiver options, whether it's the Crossfire or an XM Plus or what have you, is it's pretty cool that I can just bring this one radio and I don't have to worry about multi-protocol modules or anything. The way I received the Crossfire version was with this antenna sticking up, and it wasn't really ideal because it was flopping around, and I actually did have one crash where the antenna was pulled through one of the props, so that wasn't a very good solution for me. The way I solved this problem is I put a little piece of heat shrink tubing on the delicate parts, threaded the antenna underneath the canopy, and tied it off with dental floss. That seems to be a pretty good solution for me, and it's the antenna's clear of the props and still gives me plenty of range. Now, if you're thinking about picking one of these up and you're deciding whether to go with an internal receiver or an external receiver, some of the reasons why you might want to opt for an internal receiver are cost, weight, and dealing with an external antenna. This is always going to be a couple bucks cheaper. Second, it's always going to be just a gram or two lighter. I mean, these nano receivers don't weigh much, but you are adding a tiny bit of extra weight. For the record, the Crossfire version weighs in at 24.3 grams, 24.4. Excuse me, 24.4, and the onboard receiver version weighs in at 22.6. So we're talking about a difference of about 1.8 grams. And for the record, I did remove the battery strap on both of these quads to try to get the most accurate reading possible. You'd have to decide whether that slight amount of extra weight is worth the extra range for you. Whatever flavor of 65 Pro you go for, they're going to come with the new battery connector. These are the GNB 27s, and if you look on the Banggood product page, you'll see that the original batch came with GNB 27s, and all future batches come with ET 2.0s, which are slightly different, but they're compatible, not to worry. They work fine, they're just, they're slightly different. You see it doesn't say GMB27, it has a little stripe, so they're not the same connector. Now, I have found in my experience that the ET 2.0 connectors tend to be really stiff when you first get them. When you go to plug these things in, you're going to want to be really careful, because I've plugged mine in maybe 50 times, and now it's a real nice, smooth action. It works super well. But when I first got them, it was so tough that I actually only plugged them in just a little bit like that, because there was so much resistance that I was afraid I was going to pull the wires out when I disconnected them. So anyway, the ET 2.0s work really great after you break them in a little bit. The GMB 27s have a nice smooth action when you first get them. Whichever connectors you get, they work perfectly fine. Since this is a 2S quad, and I say 2S because even though technically it can run 1S, they don't provide you a jumper. You would have to use a jumper on one of these connectors to close the circuit in order to just use one 1S battery. They don't provide that like they did with the Eachine trash can. That makes me think it's really a 2S quad. Now, a 2S quad, I'm not sure why they didn't provide an XT30. Let's say a 2S battery, a 250 mAh 2S battery with an XT30. Sure, an XT30 is bigger than the GMB 27, but it's a more reliable connection probably, and you're using one instead of two connectors, so the weight difference, I imagine, would be negligible. I think I would have liked to have seen an XT30 with 2S batteries. Alright, you guys, let me give you a quick rundown of what I see as the pros and cons of the 65 Pro after flying them for, I don't know, 100 packs in total. The biggest pro for me of this quad is it's just a ton of fun to fly indoors and outdoors. Having 2S power on a tiny little 65mm Whoop is just a ton of fun. And to put that in perspective, I did a review of the Tiny Hawk 2, which is really a 1S quad. It can fly 2S, but it's better on 1S. And in comparison, I think the Tiny Hawk 2 is more floaty. Maybe it's better for beginners. It is easier to fly, without a doubt. But the performance of the 65 Pro is... it's just a lot different. I would say it's punchier. It's more fun once you get used to it than the Tiny Hawk 2, in my opinion. Another big pro for me is all the extras you get out of the box. I love having this battery charger. This is how I use this 6-way charger from Eachines quite a bit. I've got a big LiPo that's from my days racing 1/8 scale buggies and truggies, and that's a perfect power source. I can charge up these 1S batteries all day. Another big advantage for me is the option to get one of these 65 Pros with just about any external receiver you want. I actually really like having an external receiver. For me, it's worth the extra gram knowing that I'm not going to fail safe. And on my Tiny Hawk 2, I added an external receiver, and it was a pain to solder onto those tiny whoop boards. And if I can get someone at the factory to do it for basically the same cost as the receiver anyway, I think it's worth it. Another small advantage worth mentioning is that the Gem fan props that ship with the 65 Pro, they work really great. They've got plenty of thrust, and they don't fly off, which is really, really nice for push-on props. To put it in perspective, the Eachine trash can, which I've had tons of fun with, shipped with Eachine brand of props that just flew away. Really annoying, and so you had to buy upgraded props. But with the 65 Pro, these will probably last me for quite a while, maybe even the life of the quad, so you don't have to buy upgraded props. Another advantage for me is durability, and I know Eachine has a reputation for making some kind of inexpensive quads, but based on my experience, I have crashed this thing all over the place, and I haven't broken anything yet. To put it into perspective, my Tiny Hawk 2 broke off the receiver antenna shortly after I started to fly it. I had to repair that. The VTX antenna broke off. I had to fix that. The VTX is actually out, and my Tiny Hawk 2 is unflyable. So if you look at the standard of quality for these tiny whoops, they're kind of, I mean, the destiny of a tiny whoop is to get smashed, broken, end up on your neighbor's roof. I mean, they're not going to last forever. And based on my experience, compared with Happy Model or Emax quads that I've flown, the 65 Pro is at least as durable, maybe even more durable than those other options. All right, now let me tell you about some of the disadvantages I see with the 65 Pro. First of all, those new battery connectors, they take some getting used to. The ET 2.0s are a little stiff, the GMB 27s are a tiny bit loose for my taste. They work fine, but you are going to have to adjust to new battery connectors. Second, the provided battery holder, this little 3D printed part, it's not ideal. I think you have to find a better battery solution. It's not a big deal for me, but that is something to take into account. Finally, I'm not sure you'd call this a real disadvantage because I mentioned in the pros that I actually think this is a really high performance 65mm whoop on 2S, but I don't think it's an ideal trainer. My opinion is that the Tiny Hawk 2 is more floaty, it's less punchy, it's easier to control, it's just easier to fly when you're getting started. Now, I'm not saying it's a better quad at all, I'm saying it's a better trainer. But once you get used to flying in acro mode or at your local park, you might enjoy the extra punch that you get with a 2S 65mm whoop. So if you're looking for performance, the US 65 Pro or the DE 65 Pro might be the better option. All right, you guys, thanks a lot for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If there's anything that you'd like to see, any suggestions, if you have any comments about anything I've talked about in these videos, just let me know. All right, thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next one.